Beena, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on again on Seeking Alpha. Super happy to have you back. So thanks again for taking the time.
No problem.
So a big exciting announcement since last you were on the Cannabis Investing podcast. But before we get to that, I want to catch listeners up for those unfamiliar with the Supreme story and what exactly Supreme is all about. You want to just talk briefly about Supreme and where you guys are in the marketplace?
Certainly. So Supreme in the last few years really focused on developing a premium brand in the Canadian marketplace. We have roughly a 3 share of the market, focused on, again, high quality products. So behind our 7 Acres brand, which was an award-winning brand, and a great cultivation facility up in Kincardine, really able to produce premium, low cost quality cannabis. So we have been working towards a strategy of becoming a premium leading CPG company in cannabis. That was our key strategy going forward. And so really that was our plan, and we were moving along and making great progress against our strategy. And really, our overall goal, as always, as a public company, is to create shareholder value. And so as we continued down this path, we had this great opportunity with this proposal that came in from Canopy to continue building on that strategy. Canopy has a very similar strategy of becoming the leading CPG cannabis company, but combined, we become just a stronger entity. Right? Number one, we pair our great brands and our facility with their scale. And obviously they have a strong research and development group, a consumer insights group, and a really great sales and marketing platform. So combined company will be able to move forward and continue down this path of strong strategic growth.
So talk to us about the Canopy Growth deal. Canopy Growth bought Supreme. Talk to us about the deal itself, why you liked the deal, if there were other suitors that you had been thinking about. I mean, you don't need to get into specifics, but why exactly you like the Canopy Growth deal above all else, because it seems like you guys are a pretty prime acquisition target. So I'm wondering how much suitor courting went on there.
Right. So listen, we weren't out there looking for a transaction, but certainly, as you mentioned, we were well positioned in the marketplace with the strong brand that we had. And we did have several suitors that had come knocking at our door over the course of the last 6 months to a year. So, really it was all about how do we drive the shareholder value. And what we liked the most about this Canopy offer is not only did they offer a compelling premium, but it was that partnership of leveraging, they had a gap in their portfolio on the premium brand. So they needed the 7 Acres positioning to fill their portfolio of brands. And really they are well positioned for future growth, right? So not only do they have the scale, but they have the US optionality. And I think when we talked last, we talked about the fact that Supreme was focused on our domestic market. And, we did have some medical business in Israel and started to ship to Australia, but our focus was on the domestic market. And we didn't have the balance sheet really to go and look at US markets. We were focused. With the Canopy transaction, it all of a sudden provides our shareholders sort of a look to US optionality, right? Currently, Canopy has their CBD business in the US, but they also have their partnerships with Acreage and Terra Ascend. So sort of a fast, rapid market entry once legalization occurs. And let's face it, I mean, the sentiment in the market and the valuation, sort of the next frontier is going to happen with US legalization. So really important to figure out how to partner with the right company that would expose our shareholders to that great opportunity down the road.
So that's something that we've been talking about a bunch on the show with different guests, and also something I've been thinking about a lot is this notion between Canada and the US. And, obviously there's so much news coming out of the US. It seems like every day some kind of big announcement, and everybody's gathering, their thoughts and sentiments and what this means. But the other side of that is, you know, on CNBC or shows that are putting up tickers, you know, frequently they're putting up Canadian tickers, even when talking about the US market where the Canadians are not yet playing. And yet there's, well, not and yet, but there's a lot of complaints around that Canadians shouldn't be reflective of the US players. But I think beyond that, something we've been talking about the show is because the Canadian players are on a major exchange, because they have regular capital and financing terms, they're more apt to be bought up by investors rather than a non-federally legal player on a less than senior exchange in the US. So there's a bit of confusion, I think, but there's also a bit of, there's an opportunity in Canada that we simply don't have in the States because of the federal illegality. So my question to you is, was that a big part of the play in terms of Canopy's presence in the States as a way forward? And do you feel like that brings this high quality craft approach for your brands like that you have with 7 Acres into the States? It's just an easy access, and that's right when it opens up, you guys are right there?
Well, certainly. So I think there's a couple of things going on, and I'll unpack it a little bit of what you just put forward, which is, look, I think, you know, Canada had a first mover advantage with the legalization. And so that's why we're on those public exchanges. But the reality is we've learned how to operate across multiple jurisdictions in the Canadian marketplace. And the US, as it opens, until it fully legalizes, is really state by state legislation. So I think there is an opportunity for Canadian LPs who come into the US with this knowledge of how to operate cross states or across the market, that they can bring that knowledge in. But there are some strong US multi-state operators today in the US. So, you know, look, the US market will legalize. I don't know when, but the sentiment has moved so quickly. And obviously last night, the House voted for the SAFE Act again. And while it's been passed before, the ease that it passed just continues down this path of legalization is going to happen. And it's just a question of when, not if. And so, you know, the US is going to be a large market in every category. They're 10 times the size of Canada, and it'll be the same thing in this segment. So finding a way in, a way to maneuver in that market was important. And you're going to need pretty large cash balances to get in there. And you see that the large Canadian LPs are setting themselves up for that. So within the last few months, I mean, Canopy put in a $2 billion US shelf, an additional $750 million debt raise. But so did Hexo and so did Aurora. They each put in $1 billion shelf. So the larger scale Canadian LPs are setting themselves up for entry into the US market. Whether that entry is acquisitions or just building brands, like you said, whether they could leverage our 7 Acres brand and craft quality into the US market. This is what's going to happen in the sort of the next frontier is growing out that US market. And I think as a standalone company in Supreme, while we would have been able to continue to drive our business within the Canadian marketplace, we didn't have the balance sheet to enter into the US. So this was a great opportunity for our shareholders to have that exposure to the US as it develops.
So speaking of a strong balance sheet, you know, the transformation at Supreme is a little bit similar to the one that's been happening at Canopy Growth. There was, as you said, you know, there was so much excitement around Canada's rollout a couple of years ago, and Canopy Growth, obviously the biggest player in that field. A ton of expansion, a ton of growth, but, you know, also a lot of other things, maybe getting ahead of themselves a little bit, and now they've spent some time scaling back, much like your leadership has done at Supreme. Are you confident in where Canopy Growth is right now with the management change, with the change, with the ethos change? Are you confident that their heads and their pocketbooks are in the right place?
Yes, so certainly had obviously a chance to speak with David Klein and really see that sort of leadership that he's bringing to the overall Canopy. They've gone out and expressed their plan on productivity savings to get them their network right, and it was something $150 million that they're targeting, and they specifically said the 30 million potential synergies that come with Supreme are additive to that. They really have a plan for. They were working towards right-sizing their network and getting themselves towards EBITDA positive. Obviously, that was the path that we were on at Supreme, had spent a lot of time getting our network right so we could drive to EBITDA positive. We're a smaller player. It takes a bigger ship longer to turn, but I think they're well on their path to getting there. Currently working towards establishing a strong foundation and a strong position in Canada. So get it right, and I think this deal, this transaction with Supreme was sort of that last piece they felt would position themselves well in Canada. Remember, combined our pro forma market share is roughly 13.6. The largest player, the pro forma Aphria and Tilray, is about 15% market share. It's hard for me to think about ever being in a category where the largest player only had a 15% market share, which really talks to the fragmentation of the players in this market. So you've got Canopy combined with Supreme really closing in on that #1 position and widening the gap to the #3 position. So I think part of the strategy was about strengthening their position in Canada, filling their gap in their premium brand space, which 7ACRES nicely fills, and strengthening their Canadian position before they turn their focus to the US market, right? And I think this is what started to drive consolidation in the Canadian marketplace. It got accelerated really in the recent months because the US activity has really driven that sort of time frame of, you know, the US is coming, so let's strengthen our position in Canada, solidify, get our business right, and then the right focus can be placed on growing in that next market.
Yeah, it's interesting how much the US, every little announcement is affecting, you know, probably every player in every region of the world. We've been talking about how an announcement in America affects an announcement in Israel or Australia. Are you of that opinion that everybody in the landscape is looking at the States and wondering what happens there and acting accordingly?
Yeah, listen, I think, you know, it's been proven time and time again, the US is a leader when they jump on and drive forward. They could really make a difference to the overall market. And while it was nice for Canada to be, you know, a leader in the legalization, the real change is going to happen with the US, just with the scale of the market there. And that will help drive changes. I mean, there's changes happening all around the world. You know, we heard about Mexico, you hear about changes happening in Europe, but the US is going to be just a major market, and that change will help continue to drive forward the growth of the sector. And it's a pretty exciting change, right? And I think it really comes back to why we were excited about this opportunity for shareholders and the proposed transaction with Canopy, because we get to participate in that. You know, our shareholders now become shareholders of Canopy and get that opportunity to ride that growth along into that marketplace.
What's been the feeling at Supreme when the deal went down? What's the team feeling? Is there a feeling that they're part of this combined entity, or is there a feeling like Supreme just took the next step forward, or something a little bit different?
Yeah, I think, listen, there's a certain amount of pride. We built a tremendous brand, and you think about the largest player, or one of the largest players, didn't have a brand to fill that premium segment. And here we did, we built a brand that was recognized, and we got a compelling premium because of building that brand and being able to produce the right kind of quality cannabis to feed that brand. So, you know, there's pride in what we've been able to accomplish. And, you know, is there interest? Absolutely. The being part of something bigger and growing into, you know, the longer term strategy is what, you know, people are excited about. Now, look, we also lose a little bit of that entrepreneurship of the smaller, more nimble organization. So there is a bit of a change, but generally everybody recognizes that, as part of the nascent industry, you start off in one place and it grows and it changes, and consolidation had to happen. And it's happening now as we look forward to the longer term growth with the US coming in play. And this was the right move for us today and for our shareholders.
And speaking as CEO, how does that change? Like as you're talking about the different dynamics of going from, a smaller company to being part of a larger player, how does that change in terms of leadership and in terms of how you're thinking about strategies?
Yes. So look, there are, as we move forward, the strategies become just more complex and bigger with multiple brands and multiple facilities that Canopy has in their network and their markets. So there is obviously a larger team, and we're a small piece in that very large Canopy strategy to drive growth. But I think an important piece all the same, right? I think the premium segment, and I think I said this the last time we were on the call, there was a lot of growth in the value segment and a lot of players driving that value growth. But I think as consumers get more comfortable in the space and the category matures, as every other CPG company, there will be a stronger premium segment. People will recognize you get what you pay for, and they'll look for the higher quality. And I think, the Supreme brands, especially our 7 Acres brands, fit so nicely in that. We do believe consumers are going to come to that quality product. And being part of Canopy and being part of the strategy moving forward to really leverage that premium brand. For sure, they were very interested in the Craft Collective, right? We added the super premium brand on top of it to recognize where consumers are. And I think combined market share of premium flower for the combined Canopy and Supreme is over a 20% market share in Ontario and BC, the two large markets in Canada. So really positions them well in today's market in Canada. But I think the future moving forward in the US is premium brand, great equity, an enthusiast following that recognizes quality. And how do you take that into the US market in a bigger way?
And also we talked about last time was this being on a path to consistent profitability, and something that you've talked a little bit about today as well. Is the US a huge part of that in terms of getting on that path to consistent profitability? Or talk to us about some of the other ways you're developing that.
Yeah, listen, I think getting to profitability for any business is important, right? That's what people are a business. But I think there will be a short-term need for investment in the US market. It's why all the companies have built up their balance sheets, whether it's, like I said, M&A or it's building brands. But it's about future, you sometimes, like any startup company, you have to invest to build that consumer relationship, and then you drive towards profitability. I think we were at the point in Canada with Supreme where we had built enough of our brand awareness that and setting our network right that we drove our performance towards profitability and gave us, truthfully, the runway to continue to operate. And I think the luxury that Canopy has is the partnership with Constellation, a very large, strong balance sheet with cash balances, so they could choose to invest and really drive their brands and their growth while not necessarily being positive today, but having a very strong path towards profitability as they continue to grow.
And how much does it change the Canadian landscape? You're coming together with Canopy Growth. How do you feel like it changes the nature of how LPs are looking at the landscape?
Yeah, so look, I think that consolidation is starting to happen in the Canadian marketplace, right? And we've seen, obviously, the Aphria-Tilray deal. You saw Hexa with Cannabis, and now, obviously, this transaction proposed between Supreme and Canopy. So some of the larger players are combining. And there's two things going on here. I think you've got really trying to establish the scale and presence and leadership positions in this marketplace, which is important. But also there's the provincial retailers also, or the provincial customers that we have to manage. We have to recognize they're changing as well. So, you know, with over 500 LPs that have been licensed, more and more offers coming to market, but a lot of them are just Me Too offerings, the same thing, not unique or differentiated. And what we're seeing, you know, we saw this from the OCS, we saw it with Alberta, this need to reduce the amount of inventory, really how many items they want to carry. A new player has to have a reason for being and a point of difference to come in. So that in itself will force consolidation, right? You can't have as many players to have an, you know, unless you have unique innovation, you have to partner with one of the bigger players, and there's going to be that feed in. Like we worked with micro cultivators for our craft collective, this need to, you know, partner with brands and brands that establish relationships with consumers. So that dynamic was happening in the Canadian marketplace even before, and it's only going to continue to accelerate. You can't have as many players in the marketplace. It has to, you know, sift out at some point, and you know, you're going to have, you know, hopefully a really strong group of LPs in Canada that provide consumers with their choice, with great product offerings, but still opens the door for some small startups that have something innovative to bring to market. So that dynamic was playing out in Canada, I think, along the way.
And is the consolidation in the States something that you're paying attention to as well?
So we're watching what's happening in the States. Obviously, you've got the multi-state operators picking up new states as they can, but they continue to operate as they have to today with, you know, they go into a state, they need to have the cultivation, they need to have the dispensaries, they're sort of full circle in each state. And they don't have to worry about how to supply across states or how to deal with different challenges between markets. And I think, you know, this is going to be the interesting change that happens over the course of legalization in the US. The multi-state operators will have to learn to operate differently. The Canadian LPs who know how to do that, how to operate that way, will need to figure out how to enter into the market. I think what Canopy's arrangement with Acreage and TerrAscend is really a rapid way to expand into the US market by leveraging their relationships with some multi-state operators, and yet having this expertise in how to manage across the regulations. And so, you know, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch how this market evolves. I think you're going to end up with some very strong players driving the market, as what happens in every CPG segment, right? That happens all the time. So this is just another CPG segment. It's exciting because there's a lot of interest, and consumer want this. So we're going to watch how it evolves.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting process. And I think the thing with the States is, even with all the bullish developments, and even if there's a bullish announcement, we still don't know when exactly that's going to be implemented and how exactly that's going to be implemented. And to think about all these things, like even thinking about how you get into the States, even though you already have a pre-existing deal with Acreage and TerrAscend, like how does that look exactly? Like when it's federally legal, you guys are right there, or does that have to wait to until interstate commerce opens up? Do you even talk about the particulars of that, or is that just so many unknown variables, you just have to wait and see approach?
Yeah, I think you know, there are interest in building brands in the US to position ourselves well, and they've seen that with other players as well. How do you build brands in anticipation of this legalization happening? Because we know brands are sticky with consumers. You build that awareness, then when it's available, they'll want to try it. And so I think the focus right now, or the discussions so far, have been, how do we introduce brands in the US? How do we expand it? You know, currently Canopy has their Quattro brand, which is their CBD beverage, out in the marketplace. The conversation about how to extend the brands and the strength of the brand portfolio in Canada, which are the brands that will resonate in the US, get ourselves ready for that kind of move, is important. Exactly what will happen through legalization, as you said, there's lots of scenarios, so not sure which one, but just positioning yourself well on all the fronts is what's important, and being able to react to how this market evolves.
And how are you doing that? How are you positioning the brand in the States?
Really early days at this point, right? Preliminary conversations with the team at Canopy. We have to get through this transaction first. So we're currently focused on the Canadian marketplace. Let's get through to the close. We obviously have our shareholder vote that we have to get through. That will happen mid-June. We're excited about that. And then we'll continue to work with the Canopy team on sort of the next phase of the growth of the company.
I used to read this book to my daughter when she was younger, and there was a line throughout the book that said, "First things first," Mom always said. And I feel like we're definitely in that place in the industry. Like, first, let's close the deal.
That's right.
Is that hard? Is that hard to do when you're CEO?
You know what? It's hard because there is, transition, and there's a certain amount of ambiguity for our employees as we work through the integration plans. And so that's always hard. But I think, Canopy is, what you see very clearly is a larger company that has the resources to put the right time and effort behind what is the right integration, sit and talk to our players, obviously want to be able to capitalize on some of the great talent we have, and make sure that they're positioned for the future of the company. So that's kind of the stage we're in, right? We have to get through the remainder of the due diligence. We have to get obviously shareholder approval, and we have to work through with Canopy the integration plans for the, what happens post-close. And those are all things that take time. And we're really just kicking it off now, right? Just, having the meetings to introduce folks in each sort of work stream, and to understand what we do. And certainly we're proud of what we've been able to do at Supreme with a much smaller group of people, and be able to drive it forward. And I think that, to me, is the realization of what a small, nimble company could do, and then what larger resources could do. And I think combined, we'll really be a strong company.
And do you have a sense of when that deal is going to close, like a timeline?
We're targeting mid-June, with an outside date at the end of June, but sometime in June, we're hoping this transaction will be complete. So that gives a fair amount of time from the April 8th announcement to get through these meetings and sessions, and really understand what an integration plan looks like and what the future looks like. But certainly the message has been, teams have been up at our facility in Kincardine, and really wanting to understand that facility. Equally, that meeting with our brand leaders to really understand our brands. Like, this is the sort of learn about Supreme and figure it out, and figure out the move forward at time of the deal structure.
And I know, this is from an outsider perspective, I know there's more talk about COVID restrictions in Canada than there are where I am in Israel or in the States. Is that affecting buying patterns, or because there's delivery, or talk to us about how that's affecting the retail picture there?
Yeah, so for sure. We'd love to be in the position of where you are in Israel, or even where the US is right now. We're behind on our vaccinations, and as a result, we are I'm in Ontario, which is the hot spot of the third surge of COVID challenges. So the challenge really is on again, off again, right? We had a bunch of retail closed from late December through to February. Stores started to reopen in March, and then out comes the surge, and stores shut down again. So how to predict a market where your retail exposure to consumers opens and closes and opens and closes. That's just impossible to forecast. And it's frustrating for everybody, right? But I do believe we're seeing the acceleration of our vaccines, and we're in this sort of shutdown until May 20th right now in Ontario, and I suspect other provinces in Canada are perhaps a little bit behind Ontario, but we have to get our vaccinations up and get to a point where we could resume, life the way we used to know it, or some form of it. And that's going to come. I think by the summer it'll be a little bit more predictable. I know what some of the LPs have already announced their earnings for sort of the December, January, February period, and several of them certainly referred to COVID restrictions impacting their revenue. So that's out there. Also, the reduction of inventory at certain of the provincial, the provinces has impacted some of the revenue top line growth. So that's out in the marketplace. We obviously haven't reported our third quarter results, but it's fair to say, I think even when we reported our second quarter results mid-February, we highlighted the fact that these COVID restrictions are going to somewhat impact some of the top line growth that we were seeing. I think nobody expected that we'd be back in another lockdown with stores shut again for April and May. So, this is, again, it's part of the risk associated with running businesses. We all face it, the in and out. But it will come to an end. I mean, it's positive thinking about where you guys are in Israel or how the US is evolving. And we just, we've got to just power through to get there, because we all want to get back to sort of controlling our own destiny a little bit. It's been a tough year for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember just 6 months ago, I was like, is there a place worse than Israel right now? I mean, everybody, I think, is going through some kind of, come to Jesus moment where they live, where it's like, is this still happening? So I feel your pain. I'm sorry that you're still going through it. It's tough, I know. What's the deal with home delivery in Canada? What's the stance on that?
The allowed home delivery, I probably will have to defer to the experts, because I haven't been as close to that. I know that it wasn't allowed and then became available based on some of the challenges with the store closures. And certainly you've got online through some of the provincial retailers that wanted to control that sort of B2C connection. But I think the regulations have shifted a bit over the course of this pandemic. Right now, you still see most of it is curbside pickup. You still see people standing outside the cannabis retail stores waiting to pick up their product. But we know that the consumer is going into the stores and being able to see the products and ask questions, and that drives the basket of what people are purchasing. And that's what's sort of holding back the potential revenue growth of this industry while they're on again, off again, right? The actual power users that know what they want are going in, they're not restricted. It's bringing in some of those new or returning consumers that the POS in the stores and the conversation with the bud tenders is going to help influence their purchase decisions. And those are being disrupted for sure with these shutdowns.
And e-commerce, there's also e-commerce in terms of getting cannabis.
Correct. Like that in Ontario, that's driven by the Ontario Cannabis Store. But the last set of data that I saw, you really over 80, probably 90% of it is purchased in store versus what's done online. Now those numbers are probably changing every quarter with these on again, off again restrictions, but it's still the predominant amount of purchases are being done in store.
And is that because of the relationships that people have with bud tenders and just kind of wanting the information aspect of it?
I think it's the information aspect. It's asking the questions, being able to go in and see what's available. You have to know what you're looking for when you go online. And so that's a tougher thing. I mean, just purchasing anything online, if you know what you want, you go in, click, and it comes, right? But shopping around is the hard part, right? And in a new industry, you need that shopping around. You need to go in and ask the questions and be comfortable with what you're looking for.
So the other question I wanted to ask you is, we're talking today on 420. Is it a big deal in Canada, or is it less of a big deal because of COVID right now? Are there celebrations happening? How are you celebrating, Beena? Are you celebrating 420?
Yeah, so for sure it used to be a big deal, and we used to have big events that happened on 420. Unfortunately, we didn't last year because we were in the shutdown. Again, we're back in the shutdown this year. So the big events that we used to have are sort of really restricted. We're doing things online, working with our consumer groups, but it's obviously not the same. And it's certainly, we look forward to next year where it's going to be, everybody's looking forward to next year where, the events where people could get together is really what we're missing, right? And that's, you could do lots of things online, but it doesn't replace the in-person.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, as you said, everybody's waiting for kind of a global restart to normalcy of some kind, even if it's not exactly the normalcy that we're used to. So where do you see this next year going? Let's say, we're talking to you at the end of June, the deal has gone through. How do you see it progressing in these next 12 months?
So like I think what's going to happen over the course of, let's get through this deal and then where does it go next? I think that there will be focus on the Canadian market just to get, strong performance, continued focus on driving the productivity that Canopy has already previously announced in terms of the Supreme acquisition, working through the synergies that were highlighted as part of the deal and getting through that. So those things, you always want them to take less time and they always take longer because you've got, processes and systems and things that all have to be integrated. But I think we'll use the next, 6 months to a year to really strengthen the Canadian position of the combined company as we watch what's happening in the US, as the US unfolds. And we'll do those kind of tests on consumer brands in the US market and continue to build the CBD business that's there and be ready for the different, possible scenarios of how legalization could occur. I mean, there are beliefs that it'll happen faster and some that believe that it'll take a little bit longer. So working through what that next step is in the US will happen, but I think after the strengthening of the position of the combined company in Canada. So we've got to get that's sort of current priority. Get that working well, make it a well-oiled machine, ready and performing well in Canada. So when the focus turns to the US, they're ready.
And the existing deals that Supreme has, like the Truvera deal in Israel, are those still happening? They're still in discussions?
Oh, so absolutely. Listen, I talked a lot about the 7 Acres brand, but other brands within our portfolio were also of interest to Canopy. Certainly, they like the Blisco brand because of its health and wellness focus. They saw it as complementary, and they were very excited about the Truvera brand and the relationship we have with Breath of Life in Israel. We are currently working our way through the new regulations that were put in place in Israel. So we did get our control union accreditation, which was a critical move, but we're still working through some of the pesticide testing requirements of the new regulations. We did our last shipment to Israel back at the end of our second quarter and are hoping to resume shipping by the end of this quarter. But the delay has been an interesting challenge as we work through these new regulations that were put in place. But from Canopy's standpoint, it was, they were very impressed with the relationship we have and the exposure the Truvera brand has in Israel. So it was something that they were surprised at how large it was and excited for it to be part of their brand of the family of brands.
And the last question I wanted to ask you is if you think that there's a difference between being a CEO of a cannabis company. I know you're coming from Hain and the CPG world and the organic food world. Do you feel like there's a difference between being the CEO of a cannabis company and another sector?
I think that my reaction is cannabis is just another consumer packaged good. It really is. I mean, there's some regulations certainly that impact it in terms of how you could sell it and how you can market it, but you're still dealing with the consumer. You're dealing with customers, with consumers. You're building brands. I think it is, from my perspective, just another category. And it has its own uniqueness. Look, in natural foods, you had your interesting challenges as well. You know, you wanted to make claims on your packages, your health and wellness claims. You wanted to promote healthier eating and living, and there were regulations that wouldn't allow you. I mean, you had natural health products, you had to go through those, registrations and limitations. So, you know, maybe not the same kind of regulations as the cannabis sector has, but every category has their regulations. So I think this one is an evolving CPG industry. I think it has tremendous tailwinds because you have the movement of people coming from the illicit market into the legal market, on top of people understanding how to use it in a way to not only for recreational use, but for medical use, to deal with anxiety and insomnia. And there's way more research going on right now, and articles coming out that, truthfully, I see this as an extension of the health and wellness space that I've been in the past. I do think that, when you think about some of the pharmaceuticals and that dealt with these issues and how addictive they are, this is just a much more natural way to deal with some of the things. If there, and look, you need to watch. There's the recreational use, and then there's the people who just want that extra little bit to help them through. And I think there's a great opportunity to learn more and build on that, because it's really, for me, it's again, a natural way to address some of these things that have been addressed and not so well by the pharmaceutical industry. So really think that it is a great industry that will continue to evolve and grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I said that was my last question, but I actually have another one. And this really is it. I just want to know the best advice you've received, or the single best thing that you feel like you've learned about what it takes to be a CEO.
You know what? I think, as always, it's getting the right team around you, right? It is having that relationship where you've got strong players, and hopefully your job as CEO is just bring together people with great experiences, great knowledge in their areas. So combined, you can make the right business decisions to move a company forward. So certainly it's what I've seen in my career. It's all about the right team. You could then build the brands, you could build the operations, you could drive the business forward. It's getting the right players sitting around the table, making some of the tough decisions, but really celebrating when they're the right decisions, and achieving your strategic goals, right? So when I came in to Supreme, it was very clear. We wanted to convert from a B2B company to a CPG company, and we needed to size our infrastructure to drive to profitability. Those were our strategic goals, and we really made great headway in getting there and positioned ourselves well to where this transaction was able to happen with Canopy, right? We were able to get to that point where we were seen as, a great company because we had built strong brands and we had reached positive EBITDA. So I think as a CEO, you want to come in, you want to assess your people, you want to make sure you have a great, talented team that, could work together, people that come in with different perspectives. So a certain amount of diversity on that team is absolutely critical. And then really figure out what you need to do and how you need to do it, and go ahead. And I tend to be somebody who doesn't like a lot of bureaucracy. Let's get the facts on the table. Let's make a decision and move, because there is a certain amount of you have to move forward. You have to keep moving forward. That you could analyze things forever, and the world keeps changing around you. So best information to move forward. Sort of that 80-20 rule. You're going to get it right, and then whatever you don't get it right, you'll fix and keep moving forward. But I really believe action is what really drives businesses, and that's what I've done my whole career, and I feel like really in my short stint at Supreme, it's what we were able to do. And it's really exciting that we were able to put ourselves in a position that this opportunity came about.
Yeah, I think that's great. I feel like the older I get, the more I understand that the lessons that you need to learn are in the doing. That's how you learn them. You can't theorize what lessons you need to learn. You need to learn them by doing it. I agree very much. Beena, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I really enjoy catching up with you and hearing about Supreme, and also just talking to you. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm happy if you want to give a couple words to investors, anything you want to leave them with. But I appreciate your time very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Rena. And really, the only thing I want to say is how excited we are about this proposed transaction with Canopy, just because we think it's the right move forward for our brands, for our people, and for shareholders. I think it's a compelling value premium for our shareholders, and I think it really positions us for long-term growth. So I'm really excited about that opportunity, and as always, I've enjoyed the conversation we've had today.
Awesome. Thanks, Beena.